I live with my parents now, so why should a stranger just move into a cheap place? My husband, whom I thought would make me happy, was just using me. I was betrayed by my in-laws, and I was shocked to realize that this mother and son duo didn't even notice their own naivety. Who's going to pay the bills if they kick me out? I knew there was no point in staying with these people, so I decided to take action. I called everyone and started making arrangements. What happened to the appliances? I had a service come and pick them up. The next day, I called another service to take all the furniture and appliances. My husband panicked and started yelling. My name is Michelle Thompson, and I'm 35 years old. I've been working from home since I graduated from college, only commuting once a month. The company has been very accommodating because both of my legs are disabled, so I use a wheelchair to get around the house. This happened because I had a motorcycle accident in college. A car rear-ended me on the highway, and I was thrown into the air. It felt like time was moving in slow motion. I clearly remember thinking, this is it for me, as I was sent flying. Luckily, my life wasn't in danger, but my legs became immobile. I've been doing rehab ever since, but they probably won't get better. I've been in a wheelchair for years and thought I might remain single for the rest of my life. But once I accepted my condition, my old desire to get married came back. One day, my friends set out a blind date for me, and that's when I met my husband, Ken. He's 5 years older than me but looks younger than his age. What surprised me was how immature he seemed for a 40-year-old. To put it nicely, he's a very straightforward guy. He didn't hesitate to ask all sorts of questions after seeing me in a wheelchair. How do you eat? What about household chores? Can you do the laundry? How's work? Can you go to the bathroom by yourself? How about taking baths? While everyone else was careful around me, Ken didn't hold back at all. I'd never met anyone like that before, and I was actually pleased. Most people wouldn't ask about my legs, but Ken, as bold as he was, asked me everything. Some might find him rude, but I was glad he was genuinely interested in me. We went on a few more dates and eventually became a couple. I believed I could be happy with him. Back then, I only saw Ken and thought I wouldn't meet anyone else who would want to be with me forever. So when Ken proposed to me after just 6 months of dating, I was over the moon. But right after we got married, things changed. When Ken and I moved in together, we chose a standalone house. Even though it's a rental and a bit pricey, it's very accommodating for someone in a wheelchair. I think the previous tenant probably made the place more accessible. Ken really liked how spacious the house was. Since I spent a lot of time at home, I did most of the housework. Every once in a while when I was exhausted, I'd ask Ken for help, but he'd just say, "I'm beat today," and wouldn't lift a finger. He wouldn't even help me in the bath, saying, "Seriously, I'm not doing that. Technically, I can manage on my own, but it takes a lot longer." When I was living alone, I had a caregiver come twice a week to assist me in the bath. I was used to taking care of myself on the other 5 days that I always wished Ken would help. It would be so much quicker if he did. Every time I spent a long while getting into the bath, I no longer asked for the caregiver's help because Ken said it was a waste of money. While bathing, a thought crossed my mind. My arms are getting tired. The bathroom was originally designed to be accessible, which was a selling point when we chose the place. But when Ken took the bath first, he wouldn't put away the bath bucket and would leave shampoo bottles on the floor. Picking those up took even more time. "Hey, could you please think about making it a little easier for me when I bathe alone? Just let me have a bath without overthinking it," I said. But no matter what I said, Ken wouldn't listen. He replied, "This house is designed for you to live comfortably. I moved in for you, and you still complain. You wanted to move to Ken. When did I ever say that? This house was originally my place, which is why it's set up for someone in a wheelchair." The first time I invited Ken over, he looked at the spaciousness and the appliances with stars in his eyes. I had invested a bit in electronics and furniture. He said, "I'd love to live here after we're married." But now he says, "This handrail is such a nuisance. It's like living in an old person's home." Why would he say that? I should have paid more attention before we started living together. It finally dawned on me that the reason Ken married me was because of the house, the appliances, and the fact that I could handle household chores despite my disability. When we met at a social gathering, he kept asking if I could manage household tasks. Ken received praises from his colleagues and friends for being such a wonderful husband, but that's far from the truth. He's just taking advantage of the fact that I can do everything by myself despite my disability. To make it worse, he's been jobless and partying every night since we started dating. Realizing all this after getting married is heart-wrenching and makes me want to cry. Still, I didn't break up with him. I kept telling myself there must be some love there since we got married, right? I kept telling myself that. Hey, give me some allowance. Ken would say, you got some just the other day, right? Yeah, but I spent it already. Slowly, Ken started to rely on me for money without working. I reached out to Ken's mother for advice. Ken doesn't seem to want to work. What should I do? I asked. He's always been working hard. Maybe he just needs a break, she replied. Even though she said I could come to her with anything, she always took her son's side, saying it was natural since he's an only child. But I wasn't convinced. I've lost both my parents, so I don't have any family to turn to. I felt utterly lost. I considered talking to a friend about it, but the last time I vented a bit, they told me, I wish that I had such problems. Ken always puts on a good front. That evening, Ken reprimanded me. Hey, did you go blabbering to Mom about work? Yeah. Why would you worry an older person like that? Can't believe you, he said. Seriously, well, maybe you should work so I don't have to worry, I replied. After I said that, Ken stormed out as usual. He always leaves when things don't go his way and then comes back drunk early in the morning. I'm back, babe, he'd say loudly. It's early, don't disturb the neighbors, keep it down, I'd tell him. Shut up, don't boss me around, he'd shout. When he's drunk, he's uncontrollable. All I can do in situations like these is to keep quiet and bear with it. I felt like I was reaching my limit. The thought of being alone again was heartbreaking, so I was torn between enduring the situation or living the rest of my life single. The idea of divorce started to cross my mind more often. Then out of the blue, Ken suggested, I'm thinking of living with my parents. What, you mean move to their place? I asked. No, they'll move in here, he replied as if it was already decided. He had already planned for them to stay at our place. I understood wanting to be near aging parents, but both of his parents were still healthy. I didn't get why they needed to move from their own house to ours. Do they really need to stay here? It's going to be cramped with 4 people, and I work from home, so it'll be an inconvenience, I said. You're always thinking about yourself, huh? I never thought you were this selfish, Ken retorted. I'm just saying, why do they need to move here when they have their own place? Our place is bigger, more modern, and has all the conveniences, plus it's accessible for elders, I explained. If Ken's parents moved in, I'd have to be on my toes during work hours. Ken was rarely home, but his parents would likely be around a lot since they were retired. Sharing the bathroom and kitchen would be tough for me as I'm slower than most people. I could easily imagine the strain of such a living situation. Can I have some time to think? I asked. You better hurry up. We don't have much time, Ken replied. Despite saying there wasn't much time, Ken didn't wait. By the weekend, he brought his parents over. I suspected they had been discussing this move for a while. You know, I've been thinking, maybe you should consider a facility, Ken suggested. What? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A facility? For me? Yeah, it's a good idea, right? You have your own limits, don't you? In a facility, they take care of everything, he said, revealing that he was not just thinking about his parents moving in, but also about sending me away. Ken's words shocked me awake. I'd visit you from time to time, he said. That snapped me out of my hesitation. If not now, then when? Ken, what do you think I am to you? I demanded. You're my wife, right? He replied. Would you really tell your beloved wife to go to a facility? I asked, my voice trembling with anger. Hold on, when did I say I love you, Michelle? He shot back. I felt my face flush with anger. This guy, Ken, was using me. Hadn't I known it all along? Was it my fault for letting it get to this point? I realized I had to draw a line. But then, even more unbelievable words came out of Ken's mouth. In this house, I'm going to live with my parents. You, an outsider, can go live in some cheap facility. What did you just say? I looked to his parents, hoping for some support, but they just had these eerie grins on their faces. Why are you laughing? What's the big deal, huh? I asked, realizing they might have been targeting my home even before our marriage. Things had been escalating too fast lately. I need you all to leave, I said firmly. What? Leave now. How can you talk to my parents like that? Ken shouted, revealing his true colors. He was yelling at me with such fury. If he cared so much for his parents, why didn't he earn his own money and build them a house? Why did he have to take mine? I felt like my head was on fire. It's okay, Ken. Michelle must have been shocked since we came unexpectedly, his mother said with a smirk. We just came to check the place today. Yeah, we need to check before moving in. Looks like there are more appliances than last time. Seems comfy to live in, his father added. They were seriously here to take my home. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. As I inhaled, a sudden question popped into my mind. If I leave, how are they planning to survive? His parents are on a pension, and Ken's just a part-timer. I'm the one covering all the rent and living expenses. Who's going to pay the $2,800 a month? Do his parents think Ken's earning the living expenses? Ignoring my concerns, his parents cheerfully left. Ken left with them, saying, I'm going to stay at my parents' tonight. Hold on, we need to talk, I protested. There's nothing to talk about. I, the man of the house, have decided. I won't change my mind, he replied, leaving me alone in shock. But I couldn't just stay like that. I immediately called a real estate agent I knew. Ken didn't come back that night, probably celebrating with his parents. I quickly sorted out essential and non-essential belongings. When Ken returned the next day, he saw the organized stuff and laughed. Oh, started packing? Found a place to move to already? Yes, I have, I replied, handing him the card of a divorce lawyer. Here you go, Ken. From now on, let's communicate through the lawyer. A divorce? Why? He asked, genuinely surprised. If you're kicking me out, there's no point in being married anymore, I said firmly. Ken looked as if he'd been hit by a ton of bricks. He hadn't expected me to bring up divorce. You can't live without me, right? I don't understand what you mean, I replied. Who else would marry you? He retorted. I can live on my own, but you said you wanted to get married. Only now did I realize how arrogant and overconfident Ken was. He approached me thinking I was a lonely, disabled single woman, independent, have money, and never struggle with my living expenses. Plus, I stay home all the time, so I handle all the chores for him. To him, I was the ideal woman. Money keeps coming in even if he doesn't work, and he thought I wouldn't leave because I couldn't find anyone else. That's why he was shocked when I casually brought up divorce. You know, if you divorce me, you might be single for the rest of your life, he said. Well, if it means living a married life with you, I'd rather be single forever. Whether I spend the rest of my life alone isn't for you to decide, I responded firmly. The usually submissive me was now fighting back, and he was getting flustered. I could tell that Ken was panicking. I never thought he was such a weak man. I don't know why I'd been putting up with him for so long. Once I decided on a divorce, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I guess I had been too focused on getting married. Anyway, you don't have to move out right away. I didn't mean to rush you into a facility that soon, Ken stammered. Oh, it's fine. I'll do as you wish. Don't worry, I said calmly. You won't find a place that fast. Think it over, okay? I've already secured a place, so it's all right, I assured him. What? Wait a minute, isn't this too soon? Ken's attitude shifted from smugness to panic. As I watched his changing expressions, I found him increasingly irritating. The facility staff are informed and know about my situation, so everything's fine, I added. Ken was quite the handful, and as I calmed down, I realized just how irritating he had become. I knew I had made the right decision to leave. When did you even set all this up? Were you preparing all along? Ken asked, clearly taken aback by the swiftness of my actions. Yes, even before I met you, actually, I replied. I had been considering my retirement and had my eye on a certain facility. It's more like a condo. After an injury during my hospital stay, I read various investment books. I decided to invest in stocks and real estate. I had diversified investments between my salary and my parents' inheritance. The facility I had my eye on, I had already purchased and had been renting out for income. I never mentioned this to you. It's my hidden asset. Ken seemed stunned. We don't need to get a divorce. I get it. You can stay here. Let's live with my parents. Do you not get it? Why would I ever do that? I retorted, astonished by his density. Even after bringing up divorce, he still seemed to believe he was the only one for me. Sorry, but my mind's made up. What's your problem? You're so selfish. If you come crying back later, it's not my problem, he spat out. I won't be, so don't worry, I said firmly. Ken fell silent, deep in thought. It must have been a few hours. During that time, I was packing up my things. Then I heard Ken making a phone call. It sounded like he was talking to his parents. Pathetic, needing to rely on his parents for such decisions. As I thought this, Ken suddenly came to me. Fine, we'll get a divorce. Just leave quickly, Ken said begrudgingly. Maybe he'll miss having me around like a housemaid, but he probably thought that living with his parents would save him for household chores. He has a house, and it's fully furnished. No issues for daily life, at least for now. With that thought, he headed back to his parents' home. I'm going to go talk to my folks about what's next. Get ready to move out quickly. Yes, I'll do that, I replied. I finished moving all my stuff in a week. During that time, Ken never showed up. We met again a day after the move was done when I was trying to start my new life in my new house. Ken called me outside, his voice tense. Hey, what's going on? This place is almost empty. Where are the appliances? I had a service pick up those items for me, I responded calmly. What? Ken looked around in disbelief as I continued. I called a service the next day and had them collect all the furniture and appliances. All the appliances here were bought by me before we got married. The only thing that's yours is right there. I pointed to 3 cardboard boxes I had left for them, along with the clear clothing container we bought after marriage. Michelle, we can't live with this. We need to split the property if we're divorcing, Ken's mother chimed in, clearly upset. That's right, we can't live here like this, Ken echoed. What do you mean? The rent's $2,000, you know. Ken and his parents were stunned. I had told Ken when we got married, this isn't your own house. No, it isn't. I got a bit of a discount on the rent because I asked a real estate agent I know. If I move out, the rent will go up even more given that this is a property with disability access. And I've already received several inquiries from people with the same concerns. I paused, looking them in the eyes. I recommend that you move out. Why didn't you tell us sooner? What are we going to do now? Ken's father asked, panic creeping into his voice. I don't know. I did tell Ken. I didn't hear about it. I'll sue you, Ken snapped. I had anticipated this. From an outsider's perspective, it might look like I selfishly got a divorce, broke the lease, and took all the furniture and appliances. But I was sure of my actions. You can sue, but do you even have the money for it? Ken's face twisted in frustration. He couldn't afford a lawyer, and even if he could, I had an ace up my sleeve. I pulled out some pictures and showed them. When did you take these? Ken asked, his voice shaky. The pictures showed Ken gambling and womanizing. I spent my money on this. I'm ready to use these in court. Ken's parents looked shocked and confused. What's going on? They asked, turning to Ken. Suddenly, Ken started to apologize. I'm sorry. Please come back. I need you, Michelle. You're the one who kicked me out? We're already divorced, so what are you talking about? Besides, you don't love me, do you? Ken looked defeated, and his parents, seeing their son crumble, also began to apologize. We don't have a place to live anymore, his mother pleaded. It was a surreal moment, seeing them all so vulnerable and desperate. But I knew I had made the right decision. It was time for me to move forward with my life, free from the toxicity that had held me back for too long. The revelation hit me like a bolt of lightning. What do you mean our house got foreclosed on? I asked, my voice barely masking my shock. Ken's father looked defeated as he explained. Turns out Ken's family home will be repossessed in a few weeks. We've gone bankrupt. The debt I accumulated grew like a snowball and became an amount that's impossible for us to pay off. Ken, standing beside his parents, looked equally dismayed. He had been relying on allowances from his parents when he was single, and now it was clear why he had rushed into marriage, hoping for financial support. His mother's kindness before our marriage suddenly made sense. They had seen me as a lifeline. I'm sorry, but I can't help you now. We're strangers, I stated firmly. Ken's voice cracked as he pleaded, even if my folks and I end up homeless, are you okay with that? You brought this on yourselves, I responded, feeling a pang of guilt, but knowing I couldn't give in. Ken's eyes darted around the room, landing on the remaining furniture and electronics. Can't you at least give me the electronics and furniture? You've got money, don't you, Michelle? His ulterior motive was as clear as day. Are you planning to sell them? I asked, already knowing the answer. Please don't say that. Have some mercy, Ken's father added, his tone desperate. I took a deep breath, steeling myself against their pleas. It's too late for apologies now. Sort it out on your own. Ken and his father continued to press, but I remained resolute. If you can't pay the rent, you should move out. The place is in my name, and if I cancel the lease, that's the end of it. The words came out more forcefully than I intended, but I needed to make it clear. In the end, evicting them was straightforward. Even if the lease were transferred to Ken, he likely couldn't afford to live here. The real estate agent confirmed this, and I decided to cancel the lease. There was no reason to hold on to a place that had become a symbol of so much turmoil. As I watched Ken and his stunned family of 3 leave, I felt a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. I knew I had made the right decision, but it was still painful to see them so vulnerable. With a final click, I locked the door behind them, ending that chapter of my life. Ken's desperate attempt to assert control continued as he spat out. What are we going to do now? I can move into a facility. Goodbye. His voice dripped with sarcasm and bitterness. Facilities like that probably have no freedom and are the worst, right? Good luck in that crappy environment. Ignoring his insults, I walked away, feeling a mixture of relief and frustration. But Ken wasn't ready to let things go. A few days later, he showed up unannounced at the facility where I had moved. "Hey, what's this about?" Ken demanded, looking around in shock. His eyes widened as he took in the luxurious surroundings. The facility wasn't at all what Ken had expected. It was a top-of-the-line luxury residence worth $1 million. With the money I had saved up and the earnings from my investments, I had purchased this place. The previous occupant had moved out just in time, allowing me to move in immediately after selling my house. The facility was equipped with doctors and helpers on site, offering daily assisted bathing and a floor plan similar to a spacious apartment, complete with 3 bedrooms. It was designed to accommodate families, couples, and individuals, providing a comfortable and private living experience. "I really don't want you coming all the way here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We're strangers now. Please leave." Ken's demeanor shifted abruptly from anger to a forced sweetness that was unsettling. "Can't you just let me live here?" he pleaded, his voice unnervingly soft. "Ken, you know that's not possible," I replied, maintaining a firm tone. "This is my space, and you have no place here." Ken's face twisted with desperation. "But you have so much money, you could help us out. Let me stay here just for a while." I shook my head, resolute. "No, Ken, this isn't about money. It's about boundaries and moving on. We're divorced. You need to find your own path." Ken's eyes narrowed as he realized there was no persuading me. "You're really cold, you know that," he sneered. After everything we've been through, I echoed. "I think it's best we go our separate ways." Ken stood there for a moment, his face a mask of frustration and disbelief. Finally, he turned and walked away, muttering under his breath. I watched him leave, feeling a mix of sadness and liberation. This was the final step in reclaiming my life, and despite the awkward encounter, I felt a sense of peace settling in. Ken's desperation became more apparent as he pleaded, "What are you talking about? That's impossible. We're divorced. Face reality. That's why let's get remarried. I'm living in a motel now. Isn't that pitiful? I can't get a job because I don't have an address at the motel." His smooth-talking demeanor was transparent. It seemed he had quickly abandoned his parents, thinking only of himself. I looked at him with disdain and said, "Why don't you take a look in the mirror? You look pathetic, living off your parents at your age, becoming a freeloader after marriage, and now begging on the streets." Ken's face flushed bright red with embarrassment and anger. "You're not ashamed to be clinging to your ex-wife? Look, everyone's watching, aren't they?" Indeed, residents were peeking from their balconies, observing the scene with curiosity and pity. I had asked them in advance to keep an eye out for Ken, knowing he might show up either to gloat or to beg. The residents were very cooperative, and their pitying looks made Ken realize how embarrassing his behavior was. With a pale face, Ken muttered, "I won't ask anymore," and disappeared, likely understanding that his pleas would go unanswered. I doubted he would return after this. Later, when I went out, I ran into my mother-in-law working at a supermarket checkout. My father-in-law was a janitor, and my mother-in-law worked as a cashier. As soon as she spotted me, she turned her face and tried to hide, only to be scolded by a young employee for her attitude. It seemed Ken had been introduced to a low-paying job by someone he met at the motel cafe, where he was being exploited. As for me, I found a fulfilling and vibrant community at the facility. I frequently hosted home parties and became good friends with other wheelchair users. It was a supportive and lively environment that I hadn't expected to find. If I had known such a community existed, I would have moved here sooner. I also took advantage of the facility's amenities, attending physical therapy sessions regularly. My current goal was to regain some mobility in my legs, and the supportive environment only strengthened my resolve. Life was fulfilling both at work and in my personal time. I felt a renewed sense of purpose and joy, surrounded by people who appreciated me for who I was.